Well. We are here. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Turtles in a Half Shell, Turtle Power. It's very poetic if you think about it. Thank you for joining us. We are the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman. I will be joined shortly by two, eventually three people. One person's having internet problems. But today we have the comic book masterpiece, episode 2 of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Mirage years or era, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. Either way, a lot of stuff to talk about with this series. And if you could do me a favor, hit like and subscribe, all that jazz, because I guess apparently it's the only way you can grow your audience. I don't know. Either way, I'm excited to talk about this with everybody. And I'm not just by myself as always. Today I'll be joined by not only Chris Cloud, the Reverend, which he better have his name changed before I get back, but also an old friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Katie Sullivan. Hi. Say,
Hi.
there you go, Katie. Hello, Katie. How you doing?
I'll give you a second to unmute myself. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I know you're getting back in the swing of things. I know you're getting back in the swing of things. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you guys.
Yes, we are. Well, we're excited to chat with you and Chris as always. I'm very. Oh no! Get that Paul made me out of here. What are you talking about? Like that's your name. I've given you that name.
You made me though. You forced me to change it to that before you
but that's
let me
but
in.
permanently. This is a permanent thing. You think it's no? Yes. Anyway, and hold on. Before people don't need to know why I call him the Reverend is because he's been preaching Batman. Whenever time I get him the pedestal, he gets on the pulpit and he preaches the gospel, which is amazing. And I'm like, you're like a reverend, and I'm like, no, Reverend. That's his name, the Reverend. So this is not him. This is giving to him.
An interesting little anecdote.
Uh-huh.
I did flirt with pastoral theology very briefly in my
Does
youth.
not surprise me.
Not
at all.
The surprising Chris fact.
Yeah, pretty much. That's a very accurate statement, Katie. Thank you. All right, so today we will be joined eventually by Tim Gerasi. He's having some massive internet problems, and I'm checking in on him. It sucks because Tim's a giant Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan. In fact, he's kind of the one that has kept my fandom alive a little bit, and we'll get into that when he eventually shows up. But today I am talking about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles original first 7 issues and the one-shot Raphael whatever you want to call it issue today. And this is by obviously the legendary Kevin Eastman, and I'm going to butcher his name, Peter Laird. I'm assuming. People know me. I can't pronounce anything. This came out. When did this come out? I don't even know. Like late
1984.
God, I love you. 84. Damn. And so what's interesting about this, and there's a big reason why I consider this a masterpiece. Now, I'm not sure if this is regarded as across the board as a masterpiece. I'll get your guys' opinions about this, but I think this is such an important work, so important, not just for the Turtles in general, but I think of what it represents. And I'll kind of save my feelings for it, I think, towards the end. If I'll let you guys go first, but. I will say this, I discovered this series kind of a couple years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago now, on a huge Comixology sale. And I wanted to read it, and I read all of it, and it's phenomenal. I think it's amazing, and I can't wait to kind of dig a little bit deeper into it. But I believe in chivalry. Katie, I'm gonna let you go first if it's cool with you. I know I didn't realize how big of a Turtle fan you were, to be honest, when I asked you to do this. I had no idea.
Sure.
So,
Can we go to the Reverend first?
What's that?
Can we go to the Reverend first so I can...
Oh, okay. We'll go to the Reverend first. All right, Chris, the Reverend. Chris, tell us what... I guess I made you read this. I don't think you read it before, right?
I wouldn't say that you made me as much as it just never really occurred to me to...
On a scale of he makes you change your name and he made you read this comic.
You said it, not me. No, I mean, I've always been curious about this series, and I certainly don't have anything against the Turtles. I mean, I was a kid in the early 90s, so the Turtles had a firm hold over my world when I was a kid. I mean, how could you avoid them even if you tried? And they were just the thing that I just remember loving about the Turtles animated series and just the world is that even though it felt friendly to like me being a kid, it also just felt dangerous. Like there was something that was the world was populated by these rather insane villains, and there was really only one force that could stand against them. And I always just found that really exciting
Yeah.
as a fan. And then, of course, like the video games were a really big part of my childhood. Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo
That's a good game,
was
man.
a defining game, and I can't wait to play it again when it comes out a little later this year in a remaster. But
I'll be getting that too probably one day.
well, we'll have to do couch co-op for it. That would be a good
Oh,
stream to do for
ooh,
the
now that see now we're talking. Now we're
yeah,
talking.
because it's a good
Okay.
co-op game. It's
Yeah, yeah, okay,
eminently
okay.
playable game,
Yeah.
But and tons of others too. Like I struggled. One of the very first video games I probably ever played was TMNT on the original Nintendo Entertainment System, which is
Poor child.
historically
Poor child.
challenging.
Poor
Yeah, it's
child.
hard. Like I still have trouble with it, and I
You're a good
reasonably
gamer.
know
You're
my
a
way
gamer.
around the controller. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
but that game is just incredibly stiff. But and then the movie, like the original movie in particular,
Yeah.
was just a defining moment for me. And like my friends and I would quote that movie often at school, and no one else, surprisingly enough, would know what we were talking about. So that just made us do it more. So I love the Turtles. I've always been a Leonardo fan personally, but I love them
Yeah.
all to different degrees.
Yeah.
Raph probably has the most boisterous personality of everybody, and then how could you not love Mikey, of course? But that so I had a reasonable understanding of how the show and all of the material that spun out of the show had changed the original concept,
Mhm.
but I'd never chosen to expose myself directly to the original stories until now. And after reading, we did the first 7, I believe.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's and the one shot counts as a 8 or was it so yeah, 8 or whatever it is. Yeah, but go ahead.
no, I don't think I read the one shot.
It's fine.
But the danger really does come through. Like it does
Yeah.
feel like a heightened reality that is the way that it's rendered, I think, really lends a lot to the feeling of danger. And I read the black and white, so the lack of color gives it kind of a strange noirish feel, which just really works for it in a way that I honestly wasn't expecting. And even though it's really, really stylized, the artwork is incredibly detailed and impeccably detailed in such a way that I found myself lingering on the page. Hi.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right.
Go back, go back. Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah,
Okay.
you see
I
it's there.
found myself lingering on the pages a lot more than I thought I would, like for a much longer time than I thought I would.
Mhm.
Because you could just discover all sorts of detail that was layered in those pages. And I found that really, really cool. The first issue in particular is such a complete story
It
that
really is.
but it was incredible. Like it was a brisk
Mhm.
read, but you feel like a lot of information was just really packed into it. And it didn't feel like it was a chore to get through. It was just a joy to read from beginning to end. Every character was incredibly clearly defined. Hey Tim.
Hey guys.
And so the first one was probably my favorite one, but all of these are just a blast. It's hard not to have a good time reading this. And I was kind of surprised at how much like one flowed into two, even though one had a pretty hard stop, and then the flow just kept going. And that's what you want from a regularly. Paul, you have to block this better, man.
Tim wasn't here yet. Tim wasn't here yet. Anyway, and that's my excuse. You know it. You know it. All right. Anyway, continue, Mr. Cloud. Reverend,
Anyway.
Reverend, please continue, Reverend.
So I just found I found each issue just to be more fun than the last one, although just in terms of how complete it was and how incredibly well it defines the characters, that might be one of my all-time favorite first issues. It really lays it out on the table, and everything that's happened since then. Like I don't have an abundance of familiar. I would certainly leave that to you and to Tim and to Katie to fill in the details. But my perception is that the first issue lays things out in such a way that there has not been an abundance of deviation from the original concept. Like all the characters are very stable. And that's a good thing, you know, that it can, there's so much storytelling potential laid down just from these characters as laid out in that first issue. But that's to say nothing of how fun all of these were. I had a blast.
Yeah. So Tim, thank you for joining. I'm glad your internet started working and you're able to join
Finally.
us. I
Yeah,
was
sorry,
worried.
I'm late. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I was worried about you because it's not like you to be late. So I was like, this is weird. This is not like Tim at all. So for those who don't know, Tim is one of my very, very best friends out there. I love this man to death, and I'm so glad you're able to join us. You weren't here for it, but I did mention how you kind of have helped cultivate my Ninja Turtle fandom. You know, I'm not to your level, Tim. I think you're probably the biggest turtle. Again, I don't want to speak for you, Katie, but Tim's a pretty big turtle fan. So I don't want to. I don't know, and I'll let you guys. Either one can go next. I don't want to just say Tim, go. You just jumped on. Here we go. But Katie, do you want to go next, or you want Tim to go? I'll let ladies kind of choose here.
So I'll just kind of jump in. I
Go ahead, do it.
don't have a ton to add. I will say I think Tim probably definitely is the one who I think stays current with Tia. Like he's the person that I'm like, okay, if Tim's talking about the late, you know, he has the most up to date news.
Yes.
So that's always exciting. And then I think just kind of echoing what Chris said, I grew up with the turtle. I'm as old as the turtles. We have the same.
I'm older than the turtles.
So it's like I don't remember a time when they're, you know, like to Chris's point, I was 5 when the movie came out, and it was pretty much like the greatest thing to happen to me. Super into it, you know, like watching the cartoons, playing the video games. My family kind of is big in that. So it's like if you were hanging out with the family, you were always watch the cartoons, watch the movie, going, you know, dressing up as a turtle for Halloween. But I actually also had not sat down and read the original series. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to tackle something on my to be read list. And, you know, I think also just completely surprised by how much the first issue and then those first kind of 7 issues plus the one shot really do like set the tone for everything we've seen. Like they really do not deviate. And to Chris's point, like that first issue, when I read it, I was like, this is really well done. And it just tells such a complete story. And then it only gets better. Like you can see, you know, as they're going and continuing to sit down and write the second issue and the third issue, like I think they even mentioned, I was reading it and I'm like, man, this feels like such a distinct lettering change. And then it was like, we had to bring in someone to letter because we didn't have time to do it all. And I was like, oh man, you know, so it just, you can see where it keeps getting better and they start adding some of those splash pages in and you watch the art grow and the detail.
Mm-hmm.
But all the main characters are there, like the personalities. It was just, it felt like such a familiar space. The first issue, especially, you know, it was like, I'm just revisiting everything I know. Like there wasn't really any surprises. So just really, it really enjoyed it. It really held up. You know, some stuff it's hard to say how it stands 30 some years
40 years ago almost. I mean, it came out in 84 like Chris said. I just turned 40. I was 2 years old. I was 2 years old when this came out, so it's 38 years old right now.
And like, you know, sometimes there's stuff from 10 years ago that you're like, I can absolutely feel every year of this, you know, issue, TV show, whatever. And with this, I was like, other than just, you know, you could, you know, the art has changed a little bit. And especially if you have read some of the newer comics, you might be familiar with some of that. But it was like, the writing is good. The lettering is good. To Chris's point, like the black, you know, having that black and white and really just being able to see the art, see how they, you know, show you their version of New York City and where they live. Like all of that just comes to life. And it's just so amazing, has held up so well. And then, again, like, I think just you always knew there was a bit of a darker tone to it. So it did kind of catch me off guard when I was oh, like, oh, they didn't bleep out their, their curse words or
But there wasn't that much cursing though either. There was it wasn't like it was. Well, I'll get into that in a second. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
yeah. But yeah, so I was pleasantly surprised to see how well, and I think the mark of a good comic is it always leaves you immediately wanting to dive in. Like I closed it and I was like, thank goodness these movies are streaming because I want to play. Like, are the cartoons streaming? Like, I'm ready to deep dive back into that world because
Yeah.
it's so well done.
No, totally. And I can't wait to I'll dive in here in a second. My dog wants me to take her out in a second, but Tim, I'm gonna throw it to you really quick. And again, I want to give people I want people to know Tim really has kept my fandom alive and has really he pushed me to reading the IDW series. And that is something we're gonna get to eventually on the binge, and that's we're not gonna talk about that this today because we're gonna focus on the Mirage years. But when I started binging those Mirage comic books, those Mirage Studios comic books, it was Tim who got me really kind of invested in more and more into the Turtles, and now that I have Lulu, I will be watching that Turtles cartoon probably a little bit more now. The one you told me to watch, Tim. So just know that before the animation was a little hard for me. The newer the computer animation, but now that I have Lulu, I have kind of more of a not a reason, but just it helps me kind of get into it a little bit more because I liked it, but it just wasn't. I couldn't dive into it, but I've heard so much great things about it. I need to give it another chance. But anyway, Tim, you're a giant Turtle fan. I know you love the Turtle as almost as much as not much, but it goes like Batman, Star Wars, Batman, somewhere around there, and then it goes to maybe Turtles, maybe after that. I'm not sure, but what
pretty close, yeah.
My question to you, and I'm just I want to pick your brain specifically on this. When did you first read these comics, and did you like them at first? Did it take you a while? Because, admittedly, when people always tell you, you gotta read this, this is a classic, sometimes you kind of go, I don't really like it. It's kind of old, right? I mean, there's got kind of feel to it. And I definitely had that negative connotation years and years and years ago when I was reading comics as a little tyke, these comics look weird, because they weren't Marvel or DC. That's what I was used to. So I'm curious, as a giant fan as yourself, when did you read them, and did you connect to them? Do you like them now? I don't know. I'm curious. Give me the 411 on all this? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I actually first read it not too long ago, maybe about 11 years ago now, 10, 11 years ago.
It wasn't too long ago. It was only 11 years ago.
I mean, when you think about when it first came out in 1984. So,
Tim, you weren't even born yet, so don't even start that.
Yes, I was. I am a year older than the comic.
No, really? Okay. All right. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Actually, it was 10 years ago. Yeah, now that I think about it, because I grew up obviously loving the Turtles, being a fan of theirs. First being introduced with the 87 series and just watching that every day before going to school and just loving that, following the games, playing the games. A big fan when I was around 6, 7 years old. But I can't say I wasn't really a diehard fan then after that, because once we kind of get into the mid 90s, I always liked the Turtles, never stopped not liking them, where I'm too old for the Turtles now, that type of thing. I always liked them, but I just wasn't hardcore into it. But I always follow when the new series would pop up, some new game would come out, or the new movies. Around 2007 when the CG animated movie came out, that looks like the Turtles, it looks cool, I'll check it out. But it wasn't until that 2012 series, when that first premiered, where it just kicked my Turtle fandom into another gear. That's what made me a diehard. That and the IDW series, because those really go both hand in hand with me becoming a diehard Turtle fan, because I started following both at the same time. IDW came out in 2011, the animated series 2012, but I started watching and reading both at the same time in 2012. And then that's what made me really want to go back and dive into those original comics. So I didn't read the original comics in the first issue not until 2012. And when I first read it, I loved it immediately, because I just liked how it laid the foundation so beautifully for what we knew about and loved about the Turtles from the other mediums that they were in, whether it was the series or the movies, in particular that first movie, because we talk about this too, how that movie doesn't get enough credit as far as being one of the best comic book adapted movies out there, just how closely it follows the source material with story beats. A few changes here and there, but overall, just the tone of it just followed that first issue so beautifully. And I just took to it right away, and just kind of what Katie was saying after reading that first issue, wanted to continue on. The next issue just kept going and going. And I haven't read the full run, and that's something that just going back and rereading them now, I'm probably going to want to do, because I'm on that turtle kick again, just going back and reading those issues. So, and just speaking of that first issue, at the same time, I was saying how I really liked it and could see how the series and movies took a lot of inspiration and followed it pretty closely. But then also too, how even like in the case of the movie and some maybe the 2012 series took certain things that even expanded on it and just did things maybe even a little better story-wise than what the comic laid out. And maybe we'll get into that about particular story beats that happened in that first issue. But just knowing that the foundation was laid there, but then other storytellers later on kind of took that and did their own spin on it and kind of took it in a better direction, in my opinion, in certain areas. But everything there was just like I said, reading it for the first time, is being blown away by it. Just the story, and then just the artwork too. And just not reading too many black and white comics before then, and then this one, it's almost like where you don't even notice you're reading a black and white comic, where you're so engrossed into it with the story and artwork. It's like it feel weird now reading a colored version of it.
I won't touch it.
Reprints of that, yeah.
I won't touch it. I won't. And I'll get that in a second. But I'll continue, please.
No, yeah. So it was just such a great experience reading for the first time, and then every so often again, I would go back and reread it. And just, I think the same applies to every time I do read it. I just get blown away every time I go back to that first issue, and just how that series, those first few issues, they're just so opposite in like tone and story. As far as one, just like a street level revenge ninja story, then you go full blown sci-fi with aliens, and yet it all flows so beautifully and nicely. It feels natural, where it doesn't, like, the tone shift doesn't hit you at all, where it's like, oh man, this is such a drastic change, like what happened? No, it's just like such a beautiful flow throughout those issues, even though the tone of the stories and the settings of them are so different. And that's what I really appreciated too, just kind of reading them all in a row.
Does anyone want to comment before I go on what Tim had said? Want to add anything that maybe he said anything in there? Chris, Katie, okay. Just want to make sure you guys all know. So the reason why this is on Comic Book Masterpiece, and I kind of said it before, is that to me, this series represents so much. And again, I talked about how this represents obviously commercialism, you know, as far as, like, again, I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean, like, it shows you just how powerful an IP can get, and how, you know, how a small concept can just be gigantically huge, right? Like, it represents that aspect of the story, or of life, you know, and things like that. The other thing that it represents, and this is why I think it's so important and I think is that what it represents for the medium of comic books, because you got to remember, this is just, it started off with just literally two guys making a comic book. And Tim, help me out here. You know this better than me potentially here. And Andrew, I know you're watching, at least you better be. Hit me up if I'm wrong here. But I believe these guys worked at a grocery store together or something like that. Like, and then go ahead.
How the story kind of went is Kevin Eastman, he was just writing on a bus, and he saw like an ad in like a newspaper or magazine for that Peter Laird put out, and then he saw that, got in contact with him, and then that's when they started working together on comics. And,
my bad.
But it wasn't like they working a previous job before, and then that's how they met. But
yeah, maybe they worked at the same. Well, yeah, but I think you're okay. That makes sense. I knew I was missing something, but what's fascinating is it started off as two guys' passion for comic books, and Katie, you said something too earlier, that you had said you see the progression instantly, right? But what's fascinating is the first issue is so like one and done, and it's made that way, and because like Andrew said, they didn't know they were going to make another comic, but their passion oozes out of this thing, and you don't ever not feel that throughout the entire comics that I've read, if I remember correctly, and that to me speaks to how good and how like talented they were, because these guys weren't like, again, I don't know all their backgrounds, but they're all artists, and all they had was this passion for telling comic book stories. And you see the dynamics they have, and all their influences on their sleeve, and it's just so much fun. And it shows you that, in my opinion, what you can do when you have a passion for something and you want to do something, so bad that you will just do whatever it takes to put it out there and do it, and just keep doing it because you love it. And look what happened. It just kept growing and growing and growing. And to me, there's not enough. I know there's a lot of Kickstarters and those things are exciting, but the problem is those will end. And it's okay. But to me, like, this is so rad because they just kept going. They didn't care. Like, we're just gonna keep. They had a passion, and because I think of their passion, it's inspiring to me because it tells me like to keep going and making my comics because like they didn't know there's going to be gigantic, huge thing, right? They just want to keep telling stories, like what Tim said. Like, okay, let's do this. Oh, let's do this crazy zany space story now, and they made it make sense. And to me, this whole series represents what independent comic books can do, and why you need to do them. So if you haven't done independent comics before and you want to do them, this is why you do it. Right here. Read these comic books, and you're going to be like, these guys did it by themselves? Yes. And eventually, like you said, they got a letterer because they were getting too busy. That's what you do. You do your passion. And I love how, and I don't just love it because they were passionate about it. I think the passion comes out in how good it is because they really wanted to make it good. And there's so many great things in this. Like you brought up, again, Katie, you brought up again, the splash pages. There's so many great moments in this that they put in this. It just shows their love for the medium. And as I reread it, I couldn't believe how dynamic everything was. And one of the things I thought about was there's like, so, right now in modern comic book storytelling, it's all heavy influence on script writing from the writers, right? For the most part. And nothing wrong with that. The difference is, and you go back to the Marvel style, and again, I'm an amateur. Like, I don't know about writing as much as more than any of you guys probably, basically. But the thing is, what I've noticed is the Marvel style, and when it's artist driven, there's more panels on a page usually, right? And it's interesting because with these guys, it's their background's all artists. They're all, there's pure artists here. And instead of having like just 4 panels, 5 panels, they'll have like 8, 9 panels, and it's not just like 9-panel grid. It's like just dynamic. It's all over the place, and I just think it's so fascinating. And so to me, it's such a. This is, if you want to know how to draw comic books, this is it. Like, this is your Bible, in my opinion, because they are like, this is what you'd want to do to learn about how to make things kinetic. And I'll throw up some things here in a second, but I think this is an important piece of comic medium for people to know of what, like, you don't have to make it from the big two. You don't have to be a former artist on Marvel and DC and make your own industry, and make your own comic books from Image Comics or make it on Dark Horse or whatever, right? You can just make your own comics and like just do your thing like they did. And I know it's very simplistic what I'm saying, but I really do think there's a lot of truth to what I'm saying here, because in this, if you're passionate and you have a good idea and you develop your idea, that this is what you can do, is this. And their world building was fun. And the thing was, I think we would all agree, I'm curious, I'll throw it to you guys here in a second, it didn't seem like they were that precious with their material. And what I mean by that, and that's something I've really been focusing on, is being precious, being like, you're too like, oh no, we can't do that because of this. Like, no, we don't care. We're doing a ninja story. We're going to space. We're gonna fight mother effing like triceratop monsters, like and little brain creatures. Like, that's what we're gonna do, and we're gonna make it work, and we're gonna have fun. And though it is good to be precious with things sometimes, and don't get me wrong, but there's a point of being too precious, and they never were too precious. And I love that for them for that. So, Chris, you haven't talked in a while. I'm curious to your take on what I just spewed out at you, as being a comic book masterpiece. These 7 issues and plus the one shot. Do you have anything you want to add with what I was saying here?
Well, I think the proof is in the cultural impact, because you wouldn't have all of these other exploitations of the turtles if you didn't have these initial stories. And there's a reason that these initial stories connected with the people who read them when they came out. This is a really dynamic and very dark kind of ninja story that you certainly didn't see a lot of. Like, even if this was not a book about mutated ninja turtles, I think that there would still be a compelling story to be told here because it relies on a lot of the fundamentals that drive good storytelling. There's a blood feud at the heart of it. There is a partnership between these really skilled young people to try and make a difference and do right by their master. And but when you throw all of the other visual components and stylistic components on top of it, the potential was so high from this concept that it was clearly in need of a massive expansion. And we've seen what the impact of that has been. I mean, I think that some people nowadays can lose sight of the rather immense cultural transformation that the turtles were kind of at the forefront of, just because we are reasonably far removed from their biggest time in the limelight. But that property, it was transformative, especially in terms of like child skewing entertainment. But at the heart of it was a kind of storytelling that I think, and I can speak to this just being a kid at that time, it didn't feel goofy.
No.
It felt raw in a lot of ways. And even though the show has kind of a, like, if you watch it now, the original show, I mean, even though it has kind of a Saturday morning kind of vibe to it, there was still a sense of camaraderie and a sense of danger that was at the heart of the stories that told. And when you look at these original stories, that sense of danger is just amplified significantly.
Yeah.
Like, you get a real sense of how dangerous the Foot Clan is. And even though, like, there's static images because it's comics, of course, and Splinter is relaying how he learned what he learned, you still feel like, wow, these are really skilled beings. So the effectiveness of the storytelling is what I think helps to elevate it to the level of masterpiece, because these issues are just, they're eminently readable, they're fun to absorb, and the impact that these stories have had, even if not directly in the moment when the turtles hit their huge popularity boom, this is all where all of that stuff begins. And it's the kind of success that even a lot of comics characters from the big two couldn't even dream of achieving, and the
Yeah.
turtles did
True.
it. So we should not lose sight of that. I think Tim is absolutely right in pointing out just how much fidelity that original movie had to the original stories, and I didn't really realize that until very recently when I read these. So
It's even more afterwards. If you read the whole thing, it's even
Oh,
deeper
sure.
than you think.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
yeah, I can absolutely see that. So no, I mean, I don't think that I would challenge your perspectives at all. If anything, I think the proof is just in the cultural impact, and you wouldn't have the cultural impact, obviously, if it wasn't for these first stories.
Katie, I want to piggyback on what Chris talked about here. When I say masterpiece, and I want to make this very clear, like, is it, when I put these on the shows, I usually mean for what I think and consider masterpiece, or what a lot of other people consider masterpiece. And I know a lot of people hold these comics in a high esteem, but I really do think that these are like really like monumental feats. And you being a comic book fan, a legitimate comic fan, and you love comics, and going into it, and I don't know if I forgot if you've answered this already. I don't think you have really, but would you consider this a masterpiece in your opinion? As far as would you, if someone said, like, Katie, like, what are some of the best comics like you think that like are like not like your favorite necessarily, because sometimes masterpieces don't have to be your favorite, right? Like for instance, Tim, don't get mad, but I could say I know I can acknowledge that the Beatles put out masterpieces. I don't love the Beatles. I don't. I'm not into it. That's just my opinion. Not. I love the White Album. That's a masterpiece. But like other albums, I like. I don't like them as much as people put them on the pedestal. but I do acknowledge they are masterpieces in general. Would this at this point? I know it's too early because you just read it for the first time. Would you consider this, maybe considering the time and what it's done, a comic book masterpiece? Maybe not for you, but just in the medium in general. What's your take on that idea?
So, ironically, as you were talking, I really wanted to like chime in when you were talking about the art and how dynamic it
Yeah, go ahead.
feels, and like the panel structure, because I will say that, and I'm probably going to butcher this, if, whoever's watching and is, but you know how sometimes when you're watching stuff, you're like, oh, this feels like this, or you're reading something that is groundbreaking. And I noticed when I was reading this, I was like, man, like these are Kirby panels. And then I don't know if you guys, because I was reading it on the digital version, so after each issue, it immediately has the Eastman.
Yeah, the breakdown, the commentary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is super helpful if you guys haven't read that yet, because it really does add that context and layer to the story to help kind of form your opinion of, okay, so this is what was going on in their mind and how they're revisiting it. But as soon as I get to the end of the first issue, which I think we've all at this point established, like it is a complete full issue. It sets the groundwork for everything we've seen, and a lot of us may not have realized that it was such a complete story. But like the very first thing I think is Eastman saying, like, as you saw, I wanted to reference Kirby, and I did that through like the panel layouts on these pages. And it's pretty much every issue tells you we did the Kirby this, or like as they move into those splash pages that we kind of keep referencing, where they're just so detailed and such a breakdown, and the way they use that to show just that world they're creating. Like when they show you, yeah, exactly. So it's like when you see something like this and you know that you're taking that time to just pour over that page and try to figure out every little detail and just how long it took, and knowing that that's two people passing something back and forth between them.
Crazy.
Like that shared sense of style, and it works. It's so cohesive. You can't really tell, like, oh, this is definitely someone's distinct, like, work coming through. This is just, you can see it. And like this perfect example, it's like the way stuff jumps off the page. So to me, like, yeah, it's a masterpiece, because when we think of like the masters of comics, Kirby's one of them. And so to have somebody who, or a group of people, to have a group of people who took that style and that panel layout and bring it into their, kind of renew it and bring it in to a younger generation. And then the way it laid the groundwork, because then how many other series can we say are still getting reintroduced to the world every 10 years? Like Tim was saying, he was a fan. We all were all through our childhood. And then 2011 and 2012, when the IDW and the new cartoon came out. And these are some of the best comics out there.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's...
You know what I mean? It's like there's very little that you could point to and be like, oh, that one was a miss.
Yeah, it was incredible reading this and just knowing how much time has passed, but it still feels fresh. And I think that's why I think so many writers in the 80s are, and even the Bronze Age, obviously in the Silver Age, Golden Age, it's a little harder to, it's a long time has passed since then, so it's harder to connect. But even then, the good comics, the ones, they transcend the time. But those 80s comics are just, there's something so ahead of their time. And again, and they're huge Frank Miller fans, obviously. They're big, obviously Daredevil. The Daredevil nod. As if you read the comic, you'll get it. I don't want to spoil it for you, but you'll get it immediately. But yeah, it's very interesting. They took all these giant influences that were, they're so obvious. And that's the thing too, is like, these guys obviously probably knew underground comics to the point, but like they weren't trying to be too cute with it. Like they were putting it on their sleeve, like you said, like here's our Kirby panels. We love Kirby. Like I love the joy of what they were doing.
And like the Star Wars influence, like
Yeah.
To Chris's point, like how could you not? There's something for everyone. Like just wait a couple issues and they'll be in space. Like if that's your jam, like don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And that's again a great point, Katie, because wait, or if you read this first trade that I have, volume 1, and you're like, oh, I like this, but like I like the drama aspect. Well, get ready because volume 2 is all drama. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, because it goes more into the movie, the first film. And Katie, if you haven't gotten volume 2 yet, read the whole thing, right? But I mean, like. Volume 2, I think, goes more into the film aspects, and like you get to see even more of the ideas what they're going for, and they're brutal, like in a good way. Like there's the emotional part that I think most people really cling to from that first film is all in that second volume, which is so good. Tim, I know you read comics, I don't know if I need to even say this, but I'm assuming you consider this a masterpiece. Would you? I mean, maybe you're surprised. Maybe you wouldn't. Maybe what's your take on that?
Oh no, yeah, without question. To me, it's got to be, just for kind of the reasons everyone already mentioned. Just how this all came just from two guys. One of them just doodling out of nowhere a turtle with some bandanas and some nunchucks, and from that, they just kept bouncing off ideas. Like I think it was Kevin Eastman who first drew it, and then Peter's like, "Oh, I got to do one that's better than that." And then Kevin Eastman was like, "We'll call it the Ninja Turtles." Then Peter was like, "It would sound better if it was like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles." Just so, like both of them going back and forth, just with that original concept, just with a one little drawing that was just made as a joke. And then they decided, man, these look cool. It sounds good. We got to tell a story about these like turtle, like how they came to be. And then just like I said, all that first issue, just knowing how good it was, just coming from two guys. It's just an amazing story. To me, I think like their story, Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman, their story of how they developed the turtles is just a great one in itself, and just what it spawned off with this, not this comic series, but just the cultural like phenomenon, across the world. It's just amazing that it just all came from something so simple, from just two artists who love comics and just wanted to, like you said, Paul, just showed their love for comics and the medium and art on their sleeve in that first issue and the issues beyond that, and just paying tribute to what they love too, like
exactly
like Jack Kirby and then the Daredevil stuff. It's
Frank
like,
Miller,
they strike the perfect balance where it's like they're paying homage to it, but they're not like ripping it off or like making just like a parody or anything.
Yeah. Well, there at one point, one of the turtles towards the end, I'm not sure if any of you picked up on this, and I'm a big Fantastic Four fan, so like I was like, there it is. It's one of the turtles says, "What a revolting development this is," and that's a total Ben Grimm saying, and I was like, oh, there we go, and that's the thing I want to make it very clear, because there is a tendency to like bash, I think when you're an independent comic book, to either like go against the corporations, like, I hate the comic, we're independent artsy, and again, there's places for artsy, there's a place for that kind of thing. I get it, but there's always that tendency to like shun that and go, oh, I used to like that when I was a kid, but I've grown up past that. Like, there is a little bit of that, right? But these guys don't have that, and they embrace what they love, and that's why I thought was really cool, is that this is like the first independent comic that I've probably read in a long time from anything that really is not trying to be like super ridiculous as far as like super artsy, super serious, or super like so out of the control, or it's just too out there as far as like it's too funny and too ridiculous. It strikes a balance of everything that you want as a comic book fan, I feel like, and I feel like anyone could probably sit down and enjoy that for the most part, if you like anything of genre related, if obviously you don't like anything genre related, you're not going to want to read that, obviously. But before I kind of pass to you guys one last time before I'm done and we'll wrap up the show, I'm curious what you guys think about this. I've always had a hard time reading black and white comics, and it seems like I'm not alone in all this. Like, this is kind of a common theme that I feel. And I remember as like a kid reading like Wizard magazine and stuff. And Chris, I'm curious what your take on this is a little bit, specifically. But, as a kid, and reading Wizard magazine, I would always feel like these guys were always like super cool because they always knew these comics that I didn't know about. Or so they'd be talking about comics that are black and white, like Cerebus or whatever, right? And it'd be black and white. And I always felt like black and white seemed cheap to me as a kid. Not now, but as a kid. Like, it's just not as cool, right? Because when I read Marvel, that's all color. It's again, it's for color is meant for kids, kind of a thing, right? And I always had a hard time, reading black and white comics when the essential guides came out for Marvel. I realized how cool they were, but like I'm like I want colored versions, right? Like make it colored. And I always had a hard time. And I remember when I bought these digitally for the first time, they were black and white. I remember even asking, I think I asked you, Tim, like, are there color versions of this? You're like, yeah, I think there are.
Right, yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, I don't know if I like this. And I gotta tell you guys, this work, and this is no BS, this work was the first black and white material that I realized, oh, this is the way it was meant to be written, or to read, excuse me. And it's actually pretty cool. And actually, the color would make it suck, in my opinion. And through that, over the years, I realized that now I realized, it took me a while, but I realized through this how much, and it's not a one for one, but coloring can oftentimes diminish the quality of the line work that the artists put in their work. Like you said, Katie, like I'm going to reference that splash page you said that is so perfect. Like this, if you color this, you lose everything about how rad this page looks. And that's the thing. You lose the line work and the beautiful detail these artists put into the series and these comic books, and not just this, but everything. And it's actually made me love black and white material. In fact, the artist I'm working with now for Space Demons, Antonio Mendez, a great friend of mine. He's getting more into comics now, but he read manga, and he's like, yeah, I love manga, and manga looks weird colored because of all the beautiful detail these artists put into it. So I actually almost not prefer black and white, but I'm like, black and white's kind of rad. Like I don't really want color. I kind of dig black and white. Like give me black and white stuff, man. So I love both, but I'm black and white's almost even keeled to me. So Chris, what's your take on black and white? Because I'm curious. You sell comics. You grew up like all of us did in the colored world. What's your take on the black and white phenomena? You could say.
I'm kind of surprised to hear you say that you were kind of dead set against it, because my perception
was, yeah.
My perception has always been that it's kind of it gives things a raw kind of a feel, and the thing that I think of that I think you would probably agree with is kind of punk rock.
Oh hell yeah, dude!
So I'm surprised that you were against it, because
I wasn't against. No, I wasn't. Remember, I was like 9 years old. When I said I was against, I was like 9 years old, dude. I hadn't discovered punk rock yet.
You weren't Punk Paul yet.
I mean, I was punk Paul, but I didn't know I was punk. But like, I also was very like I wanted color. I wanted what I was used to as well, right? Because I was used to it.
And being a retailer, I've read more than my fair share of ash cans. And
oh yeah, ash cans.
There's a raw quality that, like, you could probably argue that maybe it feels a little unfinished, but that also makes it feel kind of more experimental in a lot of ways. But for me, it all depends on the authorial intent. How is this story meant to be absorbed? What's the parameters that they envision telling the story in? And just on that basis, I wouldn't be very interested in seeing these issues colorized, because to me that seems equal to colorizing a black and white movie. It doesn't seem like something you should do.
Wizard of Oz.
Well, but that was part of the storytelling.
I know. I'm being stupid.
Again,
as usual.
Intent informs the definitive experience.
Yes.
And that's true of any medium. So I think that the kind of raw quality that the stories have is due in no small part to the fact that it lacks traditional coloring. And I think that you're absolutely right on about like the line work. I mean, in more than one instance, in another story, you pointed out to me that coloring, at least you seem to say, kind of ruined the page when it comes to like Dark Knight Strikes Again. Like pages pre-coloring and post-coloring, and it's a totally different look.
Totally different feel.
Yeah, and I mean that's also a book that was likely intended to be colored, but there is a degree of detail that's lost.
Mm-hmm.
There's a collection that I have of Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Risso's Batman stories that's entirely in black and white. That includes like the Flashpoint Batman Night of Vengeance mini and
Oh,
Broken
wow.
City, that came out right after Hush, and no one paid attention to it because Jim Lee didn't draw it. But that's still a really solid and really gritty Batman story.
He's had it
And
for the jab at people.
taking the coloring
I
out.
told you he's the Reverend. This is him preaching.
But
I tell you, you're doing it. I
it's
told
just an
you.
example. It's just
You've
an
earned your
example.
title. You've earned your title.
The noir collection of those stories, like there is something that is just it makes it feel like, in addition to being literally darker, it makes the storytelling feel figuratively darker.
Yeah.
And I think that's due in no small part to the way that shadow dominates the details in
Yeah.
black and white storytelling. So no, I think it's spectacular. And if anything, the fact that these stories are in black and white, these early ones in particular, that helps to elevate it to showing what that kind of comic book art in particular can do for a story. Like it's indelible to this story's identity. I would not want to extract one from the other. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that the fact that these pages are in black and white is only a positive.
Katie, tell me, you brought black and white. What was your take on black and white before and now after reading this? Because I don't really know the full details of your black and white experience.
It's funny, Paul, because I think we have a similar journey, and that when I first started reading comics, it was a lot of the big two, and you get used to almost like a certain house style. You get used to, sometimes it's almost like this isn't what I'm used to, so it's bad. And then eventually I think you start to realize, no, I just need to kind of expand my worldview and think about the art in a different way, or the story they're trying to tell. And so I think especially now, diving into these books and having read other black and white issues, like absolutely could not imagine this without or with color, I guess I should say. And even, I don't know, Chris, if you or Tim, if you guys notice, like even seeing the covers in color, like
Yeah.
kind of as you're flipping to, because again, I was reading digitally, so it was really easy. Like, okay, done. Like next issue, and sometimes when the color would pop on screen, I was like, oh,
What is this?
get it away from me. What is that? And of course, that is something that talk about the test of time, right? We probably, if we were going to color these now, it would probably look a little bit different, right? It's like it's such a strong green, strong red, like it's all kind of contrasting with each other instead of working together, like it's not really.
One's working against the other in a way, you mean,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Like maybe modern coloring that can do a lot more gradients and actually have access to more of the visible color spectrum could do stuff that you couldn't do, but at the same time, why?
right, like there's no need, because to your earlier point, and to Paul's point, it's like these pencils and the inking, those details, especially in some of these space bits, like and I don't even know, there was one point where I was like, oh my gosh, this is obviously a reference, just it was like something in the background that, because of the way where it was, and without color to detract me or make me focus on a different part, I was like, oh yeah, that's definitely an homage to Star Wars. And then it was like same thing, right? As soon as you get to the end, it was like, and we pulled in our favorites from Star Wars in this issue, and I was like, nailed it, I'm a genius. But if they'd colored it, I might not have ever focused on it.
Oh yeah.
Especially Chris, as you just mentioned, those kind of 80s colors certainly were not doing it any favors. Like, I guess, yes, maybe if they went and did something now with like a more modern palette, or, I have a friend of mine, Claire Connolly. She's an amazing artist, does a lot of black and white, and every now and then she drops in just a little bit of color. and every time I'm like, this is such a brilliant use of color. Like,
Mhm.
it's like that tight, pick a color, pick something to take through the issue. That would have a big impact. But other than that, don't see a need for anything else.
Yeah, that's I love the fact that I was just, well, I was away for a second. I was listening on my phone still, Katie, and yeah, you're right. Like it's amazing the color palette that you could choose from when you and how much detail and how much when you do use a little bit of color like that, how dynamic it can look. Like I know this will be controversial a little bit, but I think what was I gonna say? The Sin City Frank Miller's the Yellow Bastard, where he only uses yellow for the main villain, which is genius. I just picked that up the other day at Half Price Books, and it's so dynamic looking. Such a brilliant idea too. I don't know if he stole that from someone, if it was his original idea, outright. Super inspired, man. It was super rad. So Chris, but Tim, we'll kind of go to you and we'll wrap up here. What's your take on black and white comics? Reading them, was this kind of, do you like them? Do you prefer, are you kind of, yeah, what's your journey with black and white comics?
It's really, I mean, before this issue, I don't think I really read too many black and white comics, and kind of just a little bit how you were, Paul, as a kid. It's almost like you just have that view, like, why would I want something black and white when there's color versions out there, type of thing. When you're little, that's just kind of how limited your mind thinks. But now when you read it, because when I first read it, like I said earlier, it wasn't an issue at all, and now it's come to a point where it's like you guys all mentioned, where I can't imagine reading it any other way than it being in black and white. And it's just come to a more appreciation of just how much you can appreciate, like you guys all mentioned too, the detail you get in black and white with the artwork and the pencil work and the inking. Is just all just so dynamic into the forefront that you just want to appreciate certain details more when it's in color. So yeah, it's great to read it in black and white. Just also, it's just like a staple of Turtles, of like those original Mirage comics of Turtles. You just automatically think like their origin is in black and white. And I just like how even in other adaptions, because in some of the animated series, they have these stories where they go into like the multiverse, and they refer to like the Prime Turtle universe is that Mirage early comics. And then when they go there, the animation's all in black and white. Like the other Turtles are in color, but the background, the Turtles from those Mirage comics, they're still in black and white in these different animated adaptations. It's just such a staple to that version of the Turtles that I just love. And just made me think about, as we're talking about black and white comics and color comics, but I don't know if any of you had a chance to read a few of the issues of the Last Ronin limited series that's currently going on in the IDW comics. Nice.
What I want to do is actually read all of them, the original Mirage years, and then read this. I feel like that's a good next step after those is this.
Well, see, now I don't know if I should say anything because I don't want to spoil it for you.
I know a little bit already, but don't do
it's
that.
It's not even story wise. It's just how the comic and certain issue 2 in particular is laid out, and just how the issue is paced in regarding the artwork as well. So that's all I'll say. But it's really, really cool.
I'm very excited. I can't wait to read it. I think I have 4. I want to get them physically first. I have all of them digitally, but I want to get them physically first. I have the first 4 physically. I need the other 2 now. So, but yeah,
the last issue is finally coming out. It was at the end of this month.
Oh, I'm talking about I'm talking about the 4 volumes. I have 4 of the. I think there's 6 volumes total of the original Mirage years, not including the other. You know what I'm talking about, the other side series that they put out. So, but yeah, we will be doing more Turtles in the future, because the IDW series has to be discussed.
Oh yes,
it's phenomenal. Really quick, Katie, have you read any of the IDW comics yet? The original series? Oh, girl,
you're in for a treat.
Girl,
did you see? I saw. I'm ready to jump in.
Just jump in. You will. I guarantee you'll be messaging us on Twitter or texting me, being like, oh my God, Paul, this is so good. I'm like, I know. Tell Tim will tell you, I binged the first 6 volumes in like a week. and not because I'm like, oh, I'm bored. I'm like, no, I could not put it down. It was so good.
That was my fear, though. Like, I have a friend who keeps saying, like, you have to read it. You know, you'll love it. I'm like, yeah, but I know that when I start, like, it's going to be this journey, and I have to have time for the journey. So I keep putting it off. Then, of course, they keep releasing issues, so it's just getting worse. But
yeah, no, there is definitely the IDW series. I'm almost considering a sub series of just the IDW thing because it helped. Because I realized, Chris, really quick, the Reverend, that I think that like getting a sub series keeps me accountable to keep reading what I need to read. So I feel like I'm using the comic binge as I don't even care. Obviously, I don't care if people watch my show because no one watches it. But I'm just saying, like, I love. Like I can use, I'm like, I'm gonna use the comic binge to help support my comic book, reading, and so I may have to do that, Katie, and have you on with us with it because, and I definitely feel we're gonna be covering the IDW stuff a lot.
Accountable is what Paul's
excellent.
doing now. Okay,
Excellent. All right. No, but I recommend just checking it out. The first volume is I couldn't believe how good it was. I remember messaging Tim like, oh, Tim, this is so good. This is amazing. He's like, yeah, I know. I'm like, yeah, this is so good. Like it's I don't even want to spoil it because it blows me away what they do. It's so and like it baffles me that like they literal, and I say everyone says literally like the wrong way. I get it, and I don't care. Everyone does it, but like. No, they literally, there's literature, like they have the movies right there. It's all there.
Blueprint, yeah.
It's literally there. But no, it's super good. And Chris, you got on. I mean, obviously you have a lot. You're behind on everything, so I really can't really add one more thing for you.
Whoa.
It's true. I'm just calling it. Yeah, but you know what? But like the comic binge, for me, it does help Chris make him read stuff too, right, Chris?
Yeah, sure.
Reverend.
Look, it's always
Reverend
nice.
Can't lie. He can't lie.
It's always nice to check in on different things, especially considering that I am reasonably far behind. But I feel like I've got good reasons for being behind, so I don't really feel all that bad. And I still support my local comic shop.
Sir, we're in the same boat. You can't use that as an excuse. We're in the same boat. Which, by the way, mine was awful today. I just want you to know that she was awful. We went to dinner and she was awful. So I just want to make I don't know if the terrible twos have hit you yet. We've hit them. And oh my goodness, it is a different world. So
yeah, I didn't have a bad day today. So
we had a bad day today. It was not fun.
You didn't watch the Turtles with her?
We were out. We went straight from daycare to dinner, and that was it was.
Well, what I'm really thinking here is that we need to make sure that this group all gets the Cowabunga collection when it comes out.
Oh, without question. I might even get multiple copies of it.
There you go. Yeah, right. And then PlayStation,
just so I could have
Xbox,
one on each
Switch.
system for different people to play with, no matter which one they have, if it's not crossplay.
Yeah.
Well, I will definitely be interested in that. So we'll wrap up here. Katie, I will definitely have you on soon. You are awesome. You were, as always, you were great. And I can't believe it took me this long to get you on the show. I feel like a dick. So just make sure you know that. Like I feel like I really am kicking myself for not getting you on Batgirl. I want you to know that. I should have got you on Batgirl. But the good news is, and and hopefully in the next month or so, maybe even next month, I'll see if I can. I want to get my friend Lily on there because she is a big Stephanie Brown fan. I would love to get you on for the Batgirl show and get like you and her and Chris and me, and like that'd be maybe hilarious. She's kind of shy, so I'm not sure she's gonna do that, but we'll see. Maybe I can convince her. But either way, we're gonna get you on for the Stephanie Brown Batgirl stuff and other stuff too. So if there's things you want, hit me up. But in the meantime, where can people find your amazing personality on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at KatieScarlet94. And thank you for having me. This was the perfect first show, talking about the Turtles.
Of course. You bless us with your presence, and I really appreciate you jumping on and staying up late. I know it's late over there, and I'm really sorry. So I told you I'd be out soon, so I'm keeping that on. Keeping the promise to everyone in under about an hour. It's over an hour, just around an hour. come on. But yeah, thank you for joining us. And again, we'll get you on Tuesdays, every Tuesday. That's what we're doing. So just know if we're gonna have you on, it's probably gonna be on Tuesday. We can do special occasions, but try to keep it on Tuesday.
I can handle it.
Excellent. Tim, you're my homie. I got your back all the time. We talk all the time. I love you. You know this, but where can people find you at?
You can find me on Twitter. It's where I mainly do my geeking out on all this type of stuff at TimG311. And then for more Turtle talk, actually on my podcast with my friend Dane on the Bat Fans podcast, we talk a lot of Turtles on there too, because kind of similar to you, Paul, I got him to read the IDW comics and he had the exact same reaction. Like, why didn't you tell me about this earlier? Like, I did.
I tried.
So actually, on our last episode recorded about 2 weeks ago, we were just talking about catching up on the IDW comics and just how great it's been. Just what's coming next too. Just sounds really cool too. So that's at Bat Fans Podcast on Twitter if you want to follow us there. Check out some of our episodes for more Turtle talking, some Batman too. But
man, I
and Batman together sometimes maybe.
We'll cover that eventually too. Maybe we'll cover that eventually too. Reverend, can you tell us where we can find your stuff at, please?
At Chris Clow on Twitter, CHRISCLOW. Discovery Debrief, a Star Trek podcast. Lots of Star Trek stuff in today's First Contact Day. So live long and prosper. Also,
just for you.
My Substack, chriscloud.substack.com, Building a Better Nerd. If you haven't checked out my review of the Batman, go check that out. And I've got other reviews coming, including one reasonably soon for Halo Infinite. So be on the lookout for that.
Nice.
And maybe talking about the Halo show too, just to kind of piggyback off of that, since that's going on right now. It's interesting.
Are people watching that? Sorry, cheap shot.
Paramount, when they decided to give me more Star Trek, that was when I signed up for Paramount Plus, so it's there and I'm watching it.
I am not.
Beautiful 4K
I could go on
of Star
much
Trek
longer about the Halo series.
We don't talk about video games that much as they're comic related somehow. So that's all I got to say about that.
We'll do that.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You
Yeah.
good?
Oh,
Okay.
all good.
You really quickly, if people want to be nice and donate all the IDW physical trades to me, I would love that, because I'm so far behind that I think it's going to be impossible for me to get them all at this point right now, just from a financial standpoint. So I definitely will take those if anyone wants to give those to me. I'm being very selfish and very manipulative by doing that, but I don't care because I'm that desperate. Anyway, but yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Herman22 with 2 N's, aka P Thug. Please follow the Comic Binge YouTube. Yes, subscribe and all that stuff, and like and comment and all that jazz. But also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We're active there. And guys, thank you so much for joining us. And like I said, we'll get Tim. Katie, yes, we'll get you on. I'll get you on. I'm a weekly show now, or not. We are, Chris. So it's like I gotta fill up time somehow. I gotta get people on. I want to rotate people in. We gotta get people in. All that. Anyway, all right. Anyway, thank you so much for all coming on. And Chris, why don't you take us out, my friend?
Read more comics.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you. Bye, guys.